If you drove past Atherton, California, you probably wouldn't even notice it. No neon signs, no apartment buildings, not even a coffee shop. But behind those walls and hedges, there's more concentrated wealth than anywhere else in America. Google's CEO lives here. So does the former CFO of Facebook, a few NBA players, and at least half a dozen billionaires you've never heard of. And yet, Atherton looks boring on purpose. Because for the people who live here, the goal isn't to show off how rich they are, it's to disappear completely. So how did this quiet suburb of 7,000 people become the richest suburb in the United States? And why do the world's wealthiest keep moving here? To understand that, we have to look at the secret formula that made Atherton rich, one that other towns are now trying to copy. At first glance, Atherton doesn't even look like a city. There are no sidewalks, no businesses, and no downtown. It's technically part of San Mateo County, just a few minutes north of Stanford University, but what looks like an oversized park is actually one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in America. The median home price is over $7.9 million, and in 2022, the average household income topped $500,000. That's not because every home is a mansion, it's because every home sits on land that's almost impossible to buy. Atherton's local laws don't just protect privacy, they create scarcity. You can't build apartments here. You can't even subdivide your lot into smaller parcels. Every property has to sit on at least 1 acre, and that rule alone is the secret behind why this tiny town turned into an empire of land value. But this zoning rule wasn't just about making life peaceful for residents, it was about building a moat around their wealth, something that would later turn the entire Silicon Valley housing market upside down. And to understand how that happened, you have to look at what was going on just down the road. In the 1950s, Stanford University had a problem. Its graduates were brilliant and leaving. So the university did something radical. It started leasing out land for entrepreneurs to start businesses nearby. Those small workshops became Hewlett-Packard, Intel, and eventually Google, Apple, and Facebook. Within a few decades, farmland south of San Francisco transformed into the most productive tech ecosystem on Earth. And every one of those founders, investors, and executives needed somewhere close by to live. Somewhere private, secure, and quiet. Atherton became that refuge. By the 1990s, the old money families that had once lived there were joined, and soon outnumbered, by the new money of Silicon Valley. People who didn't grow up with generational wealth but built it overnight through IPO and stock options. These were the people who turned garages into billion-dollar companies. And when they cashed out, they weren't looking for luxury. They were looking for control. But this sudden wave of tech money created a paradox that would make Atherton even richer. Most cities grow to accommodate success. Atherton grew by keeping people out. Local ordinances banned apartments, duplexes, and commercial buildings. You couldn't even open a restaurant here if you wanted to. This was a wealth preservation strategy because when supply can't grow, demand pushes prices higher. By the 2000s, a single acre in Atherton was worth more than entire neighborhoods elsewhere in California. Developers couldn't expand horizontally, so they started expanding vertically. Not in building height, but in value. Old ranch homes were torn down and replaced by modern estates worth $10, $20, even $30 million. And because of California's Proposition 13, homeowners' property taxes remained artificially low, even as property values skyrocketed. That meant longtime residents could sit on homes that appreciated by millions every few years, without ever selling. It was like owning a stock that kept going up, but never being forced to cash out. And as we'll see next, that quiet suburban investment turned into something much bigger than anyone expected. We tend to think of neighborhoods as places where people just happen to live. But in Atherton, who your neighbor is can make you richer. When billionaires move in, property values spike. When property values spike, city revenue from property taxes increases. That money gets reinvested into better schools, safer streets, and stricter security, which attracts even more billionaires. It's a feedback loop of wealth, one that turns exclusivity itself into an asset. Atherton's police department doesn't respond to crime, it prevents it. Its public schools rank among the best in the country. And because there are no commercial businesses, there's no public traffic. Every system in Atherton is designed for one thing: to make the people who live there feel like they live outside the world they actually built. But not everything inside the gates is as perfect as it seems, because as Atherton got richer, the area around it began to struggle. Just a few miles away, teachers, nurses, and police officers working in Silicon Valley can't afford to live anywhere near where they work. The median rent in Menlo Park, Atherton's next-door neighbor, is over $4,000 a month. Even Stanford professors and tech employees earning six figures have been priced out of their own communities. That's because when a town like Atherton locks up its land, the demand for housing spills over into every nearby city, driving up prices and pushing out lower and middle income residents. The result is an economic geography where billionaires and baristas live in entirely separate worlds, divided by just a few miles. Atherton's walls don't just protect wealth, they create poverty nearby. And it's this dynamic that's now spreading to other cities across America. But what makes Atherton even more fascinating is that it's not trying to change, because the system works perfectly for the people inside it. There's no "Welcome to Atherton" sign, no downtown, no nightlife. The town doesn't need to market itself, it markets through absence. Atherton is the kind of place where you can be a billionaire and still jog down the street in peace, where the biggest flex is not being recognized. Some residents even buy neighboring homes just to make sure nobody moves in next to them. That's how valuable space has become here. Not for what you can build on it, but for what you can prevent from being built. And that mindset says something deeper about wealth in America today, because Atherton isn't really a town anymore. It's a symbol of how the rich have learned to wall off not just their money, but their reality. Atherton didn't invent inequality, it just perfected it. It's a case study in how laws, geography, and timing can transform a small town into a fortress of generational wealth. The same zoning rules that were meant to preserve neighborhood character have now locked out an entire generation of people who built the very companies that made the town rich in the first place. And while the rest of the world looks for ways to build faster, denser, and more affordable housing, Atherton remains still, quiet, untouched, and unbelievably expensive. Because here, the true definition of luxury isn't owning more, it's being unreachable.